just going to do a quick review of what we did last week for those who weren't here. So in this course, we're starting out with evidence for the Bible. Why can we trust the Bible? Why is it so different than any other book out there like the Quran or the Book of Mormon? What makes the Bible stand out? Why can we trust it? And so we went through some questions. Was the Bible changed over time? Were the stories invented? Are the manuscripts reliable? And I get into that a little bit later. We also went through quickly what some believe that the stories in the Bible are just myths or legends, that they were written long after the events, and that it's been changed many, many times. So how can we trust it? So these are the skeptics that are saying these things. And I kind of have this case here of 9 big things that we're going to go through that will give you the evidence for the Bible where you can actually defend it. So when someone comes up to you, maybe he's an atheist or someone of another religion, and they'll tell you, well, the Bible has been changed so many times, or it's not even reliable anymore. You will be able, by the end of this course, be able to defend the Bible and the Word of God, and therefore defend your faith as well. We looked at what the Bible was, and this is a very important line here to know about the Bible. It's a collection of 66 books written over a period of 1,500 years in 3 different continents, in 3 different languages by 40 different authors. And that's very, very important to know that. We went quickly through the Old Testament, the books of the Old Testament. We kind of just mentioned them. I don't think we need to go into detail mentioning what each one of them is. We went through the New Testament, how it's set up. There's 4 main Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then a lot of the New Testament, about a third of it is the Pauline epistles, 13 books that Paul wrote. And we also talked about one book that is just prophecy-oriented, that talks about events that will come to pass, and these are called the end times events, and we'll get into that also. This is actually 2 tables that I actually added recently. When we talk about prophecies about Jesus Christ, the Old Testament has over 300 prophecies regarding Jesus Christ, who was going to come in the future, their Messiah, the Mashiach. And in the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah, it talked about his manner of birth, how he was actually going to be born, that he was going to be born by a virgin conception, and that was 700 years in advance. Where he was going to be born, we talked about how there's actually 2 Bethlehems. There's one in the northern and one in the southern, and the Bible actually said that in Micah chapter 5 verse 2 that he was going to be born in the southern Bethlehem, Bethlehem Ephratah. So, and that was 700 years in advance. Again, nationality, that he was going to be a Jew. From which tribe he came, the tribe of Judah. Again, 1,800 years before Jesus actually was born, it prophesied that he was going to be born of a certain tribe. In Daniel chapter 9, verse 25 and 26, it told of when he was going to show up, exactly when. Again, 600 years before he actually did. Isaiah 53:9. This is a very good chapter for if you have any Jewish friends, to talk to them about their Messiah. And the prophecy was that, again, 700 years in advance, that Jesus was going to be crucified between 2 thieves, one on the left, one on the right. Again, 700 years. Isaiah 53 again talked about how the manner of his death, that he was going to be pierced, and that was a picture of the crucifixion, which during Isaiah's time was an unknown concept, because most of the way that they killed people back then was by stoning. Again, that was 700 years in advance. He was going to suffer no broken bones. Unlike the thieves on the left and the right, they suffered broken bones, but Jesus actually did not suffer any broken bones. And that was in Psalm 22:17. that they were going to cast lots or gamble for his clothing in Psalm 22, and that he was going to be buried in a rich man's tomb. Joseph, which was a member of the Sanhedrin, he was a rich man, and he actually took his body and buried Jesus in his tomb. Again, that was 700 years. So again, we talked about how there's just so many prophecies that happen, over 300 prophecies regarding the coming Messiah in the Old Testament. And we also briefly talked about how just taking 8 of those 300, that the chances of someone else fulfilling just 8 of these prophecies was just astronomical. 1 in 10 to the 17th power. That's 1 with 17 zeros after it. So highly unlikely. And we just gave you guys a visual of how that was going to be. Probability of a lightning strike is 1 in 1 million, but anybody else that could have fulfilled these prophecies other than Jesus, again, it's just very unlikely, So Jesus was really the guy that the Old Testament prophesied about. This is kind of where we left off. Again, Bible prophecy is one of the major reasons why we can trust the Bible. It's actually one of my very favorite subjects. I studied it a lot. I studied actually a lot. And Bible prophecy, what is prophecy? Bible prophecy is things that the Bible predicted, events that the Bible predicted that came to pass. Now, 28% of the Bible has Bible prophecy in it. So fulfilled prophecies, fulfilled events that the Bible predicted long before the events. But not only that, things that are going to happen in the future that have not yet seen their ultimate fulfillment. So these prophecies that the Bible talks about that have yet to happen. And within Bible prophecy, there's this branch of Bible prophecy called eschatology. Eschatology, if you recognize the root, eschatos, which means end times. And that makes up 16% of the 28%. And what is eschatology? Eschatology is specifically the study of the end times, meaning what's going to happen in the end. So this is not talking about Jesus, how he was born and prophecies that already happened. These are prophecies that will happen, and they will all happen because the Bible cannot lie. God is the author of the Bible, and when he says something, you can take it to the bank. And the way I kind of have learned this is that if, God has gone to if you guys play basketball, he's gone to the free throw line and he's done 9 free throws in a row and he's made every single one of them. And now he's about to take the 10th free throw, and chances are very highly likely that he's going to make the 10th one, because he's already made 9 free throws in a row. So that's how I kind of remember the end time scenario. So the end time scenario, we're actually living in the end times. So the church age, we're currently in the church age. The next event that will come is called the rapture of the church. That is when all believers will be caught up to be with Jesus. And I'll get into that a little bit later. Following the rapture of the church is going to be the Great Tribulation, which lasts 7 years. It's going to be a time of very intense persecution. You're going to have the Antichrist come, the mark of the beast system, and we can get into that also, followed by the millennial kingdom, and then the eternal state. So all these things the Bible has laid out, and this is actually, this prophecy chart is one of my favorite prophecy charts by evangelist Don Perkins. If you guys are interested in Bible prophecy, he's a really good guy to look up. And his prophecy chart of end times events is very detailed. And I don't want you to really go through every single point here. It's kind of very confusing, and it's a very, very busy slide. My whole point of putting this together is to show you that God is a God of detail. So no other book, no other religious book has laid out a plan of end times as the Bible. The Quran doesn't. the Book of Mormon, the Hindu Verdus. There's all these religious books out there. None of them have an orderly and perfect Bible chronology of end times events as the Bible does. And again, based on what we've seen in the past, we know that the future is going to be set. God is a God of detail. So, and I think God did it for a purpose, because when someone is really detailed, you can trust that it's probably going to happen because there's just so much detail. But this is actually a much easier prophecy chart that I like to refer to again. So again, this just shows you that God has laid out a plan for the end times events that will come soon, and I think they're very, very close to us, and we can trust Him on that. If you guys are into Bible prophecy, this is a very good book to get. It's John Walvert, and he talks about every single prophecy of the Bible. And it's a very thick book. I have a copy of it. It's awesome to refer to once in a while, but you guys can do that if you want. Some of these verses that I wanted to talk to you guys about concerning Bible prophecy. In Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 through 10, God says, I am God, and there's none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done. So God's saying, I am God. I'm able to predict, things that the beginning from the end. I'm able to tell you guys just exactly what's going to happen. And only I can do that because I am God. In John chapter 13 and chapter 14, this was in the upper room. Jesus was meeting with his disciples, and he was going to be, betrayed by Judas and crucified. Jesus says, from now on, I am telling you before it comes to pass. And what he meant by before it, meaning his death, what he was talking to the apostles about, that he was going to be betrayed and he's going to die and pay the sin debt of humanity. And he says, before it comes to pass, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he, the Messiah. Again, in chapter 14, he says, now I have told you before it happens, the events that he laid out to his disciples, so that when it does happen, you may believe. In the book of Revelation, this is one of the angels. He's talking to John, one of the apostles, and he says, I am a fellow servant and of your brethren who have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God. And this is what the angel says to John. For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. In other words, Jesus is all about prophecy. If you want to get to know Jesus, you have to understand prophecy. You have to understand that Jesus, a part of him, is end times Bible prophecy. So for someone to say, you know what, I really don't care about Jesus's prophecy, I don't care about end time events. No, that's a big part of who Jesus is. He's a God of prophecy. He is the spirit of prophecy. And if we don't study Bible prophecy, we're not really getting a portion of who Jesus is. And I don't know about you, but I want to know everything about Jesus, because if we love Jesus, we want to know everything there is to know about him, and that includes Bible prophecy. Let's get into archaeology. Again, unlike any other religious book, the Bible is the only book that actually has verified archaeology. So these are discoveries that confirm certain events in the Bible, certain historical events. So, for example, the Pool of Siloam, which is translated Sent, was discovered just recently in 2004. And this was done by excavation. And this was in John chapter 9 when Jesus healed the blind man. Famously, in John chapter 9, verses 7, this is where Jesus sent the blind man to cleanse his eyes, and he actually had his vision restored. So this was the Pool of Siloam. There are a lot of archaeological findings that we have. This is an ancient slab of stone with the inscription that referred to King David. That was found also recently in 1993. So again, a lot of the things, the Bible is not Veggie Tales. It's not, Jack and the Beanstalk. It's real history. A lot of archaeologists even use the Bible as a historical document, a verifiable historical document. Other discoveries that they have found, accounts of the catastrophic flood of Genesis 6 through 8, the ruins of Jericho in Joshua 6, Hezekiah's tunnel in 2 Kings that was used to bring water into the city of Jerusalem, ancient ruins of Babylon described in the book of Daniel, including the ruins of King Nebuchadnezzar's palaces. So King Nebuchadnezzar was a real person, and that's the whole point of what I'm trying to make here. So there are just countless other discoveries. Jacob's well, where Jesus famously met the Samaritan woman. And this woman became a big evangelist, so to speak, for Jesus to the Samaritans. The pool of Bethesda, where Jesus healed a man that was lame for 38 years. And then synagogues in Capernaum. So I can really, Herod's palace, where John the Baptist was imprisoned and then beheaded. So there's just a lot of discoveries and there's still more things that are being discovered right now, almost on a daily basis. Coins with inscriptions of Pontius Pilate and Caesar from that time period, being discovered every single day. One of the most important discoveries were the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were discovered in 1947. And these include over 200 Old Testament manuscripts. And these are really old copies dating very close to Jesus' time. And these were discovered. Now, I want you guys to understand that we don't actually have the original documents of the Bible, like the book of Isaiah. We don't have original copies of anything. But we do have manuscripts, written copies that are really close to the time period or where all these events happen in the Bible. And I actually wanted to show maybe a quick video, if that's possible, talking about how the Bible is used in archaeology, or we can actually do this one in the Q&A session. But maybe we can do that in the Q&A session. Some other historical sources that are very important that we can look at are Roman historians, some Jewish historians who are not Christians that talked about Jesus. Even early critics of Christianity talked about important events that were described in the New Testament that they confirmed, even non-Christians confirmed that these things actually happened, just as the New Testament was laying out. One of them was Tacitus. He was a Roman historian who wrote about Jesus around 81-1-6. He confirmed that Jesus was executed. Again, this one, he was not a believer in Jesus, but he did confirm that Jesus was a real person. He was executed, therefore he has to be a real person. That, just as the Bible describes, that the execution actually occurred under Pontius Pilate. And as the Bible correctly states, that this happened during the reign of Tiberius Caesar. Because there were many Caesars. Caesar is just a title, but this particular Caesar's name was Tiberius Caesar. So it's exactly the same, the correct Caesar of the Bible. Flavius Josephus is actually one of the major Jewish historians of that time. And his writings refer to Jesus being a teacher. Also talked about his crucifixion and the existence of early Christians. This next slide, and I think I'll probably stop here. It looks like we're almost running out of time, but in the Antiquities 18, this is a Jewish document. Josephus, who is a Jewish scholar, this is what he had to say, and this is a direct quote from Josephus. About this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man, for he was one who performed surprising deeds and was a teacher of such people as accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks or the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when, upon the accusation of the principal men amongst us, Pilate had condemned him to a cross, those who had first come to love him did not cease. He appeared to them, spending a third day restored to life. That means that after he died, he came back to life. Josephus is speaking of these events, speaking of Jesus' resurrection from the dead. Yeah. For the prophets of God had foretold these things, and 1,000 other marvels about him. And the tribe of the Christians, so called after him, has still to this day not disappeared. Again, this is coming from a non-biblical, non-Christian source. This is a Jewish scholar. Now, we don't know if he became a Christian later on, if he put his faith in Jesus, but at the time of this writing, he was not a believer because he was just speaking to him as, just a man, but apparently he was the Christ, as many had said. So he was really describing the events of the time. So more than 30 sources outside of the Bible, written within 150 years of Jesus' life, that attest to more than 100 facts regarding Jesus' lives, teachings, crucifixion, and resurrection exist. That's huge, that there are just these extra biblical sources. So these are outside of the Bible. And maybe I can just stop at this slide here. Some other extra biblical sources talked about Noah's flood, the long lifespans of the people prior to the flood, details surrounding the Exodus when the Jews left Egypt, then the Assyrian invasion of Israel, Nebuchadnezzar's invasion of Judah, Cyrus freeing of the Jews from Babylon. Again, this is a historical event. The prolonged darkness on the day Jesus died, Herod Agrippa's sudden death after being hailed as a god, and the expulsion of the Jews from Rome. So as you can see, there are just a lot of sources outside of the Bible that confirm the historical events that the Bible in great detail states. So we can really take the Bible as a historical source. And that's where I'm going to kind of leave it at this point. And maybe we can go to any questions if people have any questions.